It started with a scream, sharp, shrill, and absolutely inhuman. The kind of noise that could freeze your blood. If only it didn't sound so damn confused at the same time. Dr. Alan Reyes was halfway through a lukewarm cup of synth coffee in the medbay lounge when the sound echoed down the sterile corridor. He blinked once, sighed, then calmly stood and headed toward the source of chaos. Room C7. That's where they'd stationed the alien exchange students. 5 of them, each from different corners of the known galaxy, here to observe human medical practices for the semester. They were curious, brilliant, and catastrophically unprepared for the messes that came with human anatomy. Alan pushed open the door without ceremony. Inside, it looked like a battlefield. Zernaxa, the amphibious trainee from Crotal Prime, was flailing her 7-fingered limbs over a human patient lying calmly on the table. She had surgical tools in one hand and a book in the other, trying to read, diagnose, and operate all at once. Ilrix, the bird-like creature with shimmering feathers, squawked orders in his native tongue, while another student, the crystal-embodied Ivina, was trying to assemble a bone saw, backwards. "Someone get me the plasma coagulator." Zernaxa shouted. "You don't need that," Alan said, stepping forward. The room stilled. "He's bleeding internally." Zernaxa insisted, wide-eyed and twitching. Alan glanced at the patient, a human tech engineer who had tripped over a toolkit and landed ribs first on a wrench. There was a gash on his side, superficial, bleeding slightly but manageable. Certainly nothing requiring surgery, let alone the armory of alien tech spread across the table like they were about to go to war with his spleen. Alan knelt beside the bed, peeled back the gauze, and frowned. 3 centimeters deep. Non-arterial. Tissue swelling but no organ trauma. "You were going to crack him open for this?" he asked, raising a brow. Ilrix ruffled his feathers. "Protocol suggests internal review and repair." "Not when the damage is skin deep," Alan said. But we prepared for ours. "This is the perfect opportunity for a full surgical breakdown," Zernaxa protested, her translator necklace humming with stress. Alan rolled up his sleeves. "I've got something better." He reached into the drawer, pulling out a tiny paper packet. The students leaned in, eyes gleaming with fascination as he tore it open to reveal needle and thread. "What is that?" Ivina asked, voice crystalline and sharp. "Sutures," Alan replied, threading the needle with the casual finesse of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Basic stitching. Old tech, but it works like a charm." They watched stunned as he cleaned the wound with saline, dried it, then stitched it closed in 5 neat loops. No plasma, no lasers, no alien tools spinning like death traps. Just thread in a steady hand. The patient stirred. "Did it work?" "Like a charm," Alan said, wiping the site and applying a small bandage. "You'll be good as new in 2 days." The engineer gave him a thumbs up before dozing back off. For a long moment, the alien said nothing. Then Zernaxa blinked both sets of eyelids and asked, "That's it?" "That's it," Alan said. "Sometimes the simplest answer is the best one." "But the manuals, the lectures, the trauma simulation models." Alan stood. "Those are great, but in the real world, people don't always come with easy-to-follow instructions. You've got to use judgment, not just the textbook." Ilrix looked sheepish. "We assumed your kind relied on advanced interventions." Alan chuckled. "We do, when we need them. But when we don't, we keep it simple. We don't fix what isn't broken." Zernax's shoulders sagged. "We spent 8 hours calibrating the circulatory scope." "You can still use it," Alan said, grinning. "Just not for paper cuts." A murmur of laughter broke out among the students, nervous but genuine. Alan walked toward the door, then paused. "Tell you what, tomorrow, I'll show you how we handle sprained ankles without calling for robotic assistance. You won't believe it." He stepped out, coffee long cold, but spirits warmed by the look of absolute awe on their faces. Maybe they'd come here thinking they'd teach humans a thing or two about medicine. Instead, they were about to learn that even the most advanced species in the galaxy still had something to learn about common sense. And maybe, just maybe, stitching a wound shut by hand would be the moment that stuck with them the longest. Not because it was fancy, but because it worked. Behind him, he could already hear Aelrix asking if thread came in different colors. Zernaxa muttered something about cross-stitching. Alan chuckled, shook his head, and started mentally preparing for tomorrow's lesson, how to use an ice pack. Little did he know, today's incident would become an interstellar case study in overengineering gone wrong. But for now, it was just another Tuesday. The next day, Dr. Alan Reyes found himself standing in front of a semicircle of eager alien trainees, each of them clutching notepads, datapads, or in Ivina's case, a glowing crystalline log that recorded her every thought. Alan rubbed the back of his neck, staring down at the basic medical equipment he'd gathered: gauze, athletic tape, a plastic ice pack, and an AC bandage. Today, he began, wanted to learn about sprains. Aelrix raised his clawed hand. Sprains are muscular explosions, yes? No, Alan replied with a short laugh. Sprains are when ligaments, tough bands of tissue connecting bones, are overstretched or torn. Happens a lot with ankles, usually from something as simple as misstepping. Zernaxa, who now wore a fanny pack labeled emergency trauma kit, chirped in confusion. Your species weakens from minor impact. We don't weaken, Alan said. We just get injured like any other species. But most of the time, we don't need surgery, bone replacements, or regeneration pods. We use this. He held up the ice pack. 5 sets of alien eyes blinked, some in horizontal slits, others in radiant pulses. None of them looked impressed. It's a bag, said Aelrix. It's cold, said Ivina, touching it and pulling back in alarm. That's the point, Alan said. Cold reduces swelling and pain. We call it cryotherapy. Simple, safe, and effective. With a nod, he gestured toward the volunteer, a young security officer named Mason who had, entirely coincidentally, sprained his ankle the night before during a routine patrol. The human limped in with a wry grin, lowering himself onto the exam bed. I'm the guinea pig today, huh? Mason quipped. Alan winked. The galaxy's watching. He demonstrated the process, elevating Mason's foot, applying the ice pack for 10 minutes with a towel buffer, wrapping the ankle with the bandage for compression. Every step was met with intense scrutiny. Ivina clicked her crystalline appendages together. Why not administer regenerative injections? Because those are expensive, risky if overused, and sometimes unnecessary, Alan said. The body heals itself. Our job is to support it, not override it. Zernaxa frowned. But regeneration is efficient. It's also excessive in minor cases, Alan said firmly. You don't sweat a mosquito with a railgun. The analogy confused them, except Aelrix, who chuckled in appreciation. After the demonstration, Alan handed each student a practice dummy leg, complete with simulated swelling. He watched as they tried to mimic his wrapping technique. It wasn't pretty. Ivina's dummy leg was now bundled like a roast chicken. Zernaxa over-tightened hers until simulated fluid began leaking from the seams. Aelrix gave up halfway and began sketching blueprints for a robot ankle wrapper. No, Alan said, walking between them. You're overthinking it. Medical care isn't always about being precise to 1,000th of a micron. Sometimes it's about doing enough and trusting the body to do the rest. But that's so imprecise, Zernaxa mumbled. It's human, Alan replied. He could see the shift in their expressions then, small, but there. Realization beginning to take root. Not everything in the galaxy was solved with tech, machines, or nanobots. Sometimes it took a bag of ice, some fabric, and patience. Mason stood and tested his wrapped ankle. Feels better already. The aliens gasped. Already? Alan laughed. It'll take a few days. But that's the point. Healing isn't instant. As the lesson wrapped up, Ivina approached him directly, her glow softening to a curious blue. Dr. Reyes, may I ask a question? Of course. If technology enables us to eliminate delay, why do humans choose to wait? He paused. It was a good question, one he hadn't really thought about in years. Because not everything is about speed, Alan said. Sometimes healing slowly teaches you things, like resilience, patience, humility. You learn to respect your body and what it can do. That matters. Ivina was quiet for a moment, then nodded. We do not value slowness. Maybe you should try it sometime, Alan said. As the trainees filed out, Alan caught Zernaxa muttering something about inventing a cold-wrapping dispersal glove. He smiled. Let them tinker. But at least now, they'd start from a place of understanding, not just automation. They're putting a bandage on a gunshot wound. On purpose. Captain Vrax stormed into the infirmary an hour later, his scales slightly paled and his breathing rapid, signs of stress for his species. Alan Reyes didn't even look up from the medical dummy he was wrapping for the 4th time today. Zernaxa and Ivina stood nearby, now holding perfectly applied compression bandages, like proud interns. Vrax jabbed a talon at the demonstration table. What is this madness? Alan exhaled and straightened up. It's called first aid, Captain. You know, the thing you asked me to teach them. Vrax snarled. I thought you would be instructing them in battlefield trauma response, surgery under fire, triage prioritization, not how to wrap sprained limbs with woven fiber. Ivina stepped in. Captain, Dr. Reyes is demonstrating standard human procedures for non-lethal injuries. It's fascinating. Vrax turned to her, his eyes glowing with frustration. Fascinating. He had you spend 10 minutes learning how to elevate an ankle. Alan finally turned fully to face him. Let me ask you something, Captain. What happens if someone on your crew gets a minor injury during deep space transit and the automed is offline? They wait, Vrax said bluntly. Or endure it. Or they could treat it, Alan said, voice firm. No need to waste a surgical nanocluster on a twisted wrist. The captain grunted. You are implying that primitive methods are superior. I'm saying they're useful, especially when the high-tech options aren't available. He tapped the bandaged dummy. This doesn't require a med pod or a dozen synthetic compounds. It just needs knowledge in 2 hands. Think of it as galactic redundancy. Zernaxa nodded. A backup protocol. Efficient in resource-scarce conditions. Logical. Vrax crossed his arms. And what next? Leech therapy. Alan grinned. Funny you mention that. We do still use medicinal leeches, sometimes, for blood pooling and tissue recovery. Ivina looked delighted. Truly? Fascinating. I must study this leech. The captain let out a groaning growl, turning toward the exit. Carry on with your wound dressing class, Doctor. Just try not to get anyone killed by under-medicating a plasma burn. As Vrax left, Alan called after him. We're covering that next week. When not to use a bandage. Zernaxa tilted her head. There is a lesson for not doing something. Alan sighed and smiled. Sometimes that's the most important one. Later that evening, Alan was summoned to the bridge. A communication pod had arrived. An emergency shuttle from the Colonial Freighter Glass Horizon, which had suffered a minor collision with an asteroid. No fatalities, but multiple injuries. The freighter's automed system had gone offline, and their single nurse had been incapacitated during the impact. They need assistance, said Commander Rilek, scanning the incoming report. Basic fractures, lacerations, mild concussions. Alan looked to his students. Zernaxa had his trauma kit strapped tight. Ivina held a stack of gauze packs and diagnostic chips. Even Aelric stood ready, medical gloves stretched comically over his clawed fingers. Time for your first field test, Alan said. When they arrived aboard the freighter, the scene was controlled chaos. Smoke hung in the air, but no fire. Passengers had been secured in makeshift recovery rooms. The injured lay on padded benches, groaning, sweating, bleeding, but conscious. Alan got to work immediately. He divided his students into teams, one for triage, one for treatment, one for supply relay. He moved from case to case, giving brief, focused instructions. Pressure on that wound, don't let up. Keep his head elevated, concussion protocol. Fractured forearm, splint and immobilize. Tape, don't overwrap. Zernaxa trembled slightly at first, but found his rhythm fast. Ivina remained calm, efficient. Aelric's developed an unexpected talent for calming patients with his dry humor. One human boy had a deep gash on his thigh, bleeding but not arterial. The boy was shaking, terrified. His eyes widened as Ivina approached with a sterilizer. I'm not going to die, am I? he whispered. Ivina shook her head, her voice gentle and warm. You are not dying. You are healing. It begins here. She applied antiseptic and gauze with surprising tenderness. Alan watched from a distance. Pride swelled in his chest. They weren't just mimicking him now. They understood. Hours later, back aboard the Boundless Curiosity, Vrax reviewed the post-mission log. His claws hovered over the datapad as he read the list of successful treatments. Over 20 injuries stabilized. No advanced tech used. No casualties. He looked up as Alan entered the briefing room. I underestimated your methods, the captain said, grudgingly. Alan folded his arms. Most people do. Until they work. Vrax handed him the report. I'll approve continued instruction. But next time, I expect them to be ready for all medical scenarios. High-tech and low. Alan nodded. They will be. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Captain? Yes. We're holding a leech lab next Thursday. Vrax blinked, eyes narrowing. Tell me you're joking. Alan grinned. Come find out. Why do they fear you? What did your people survive? The Boundless Curiosity continued its mission toward the outer edge of Map Confederation space, the star lanes thinning like threads into the unknown. Inside the vessel, though, Alan's classroom thrived. Zirnaxa now ran drills with the precision of a veteran corpsman. Ivina had begun translating human anatomy diagrams into a trilingual training guide. Even Elrix, the ship's most accident-prone engineer, had stopped fainting at the sight of blood. Captain Vrax, still skeptical but increasingly intrigued, approved a full rotation of crew members for primitive first aid familiarization. What began as a curiosity had grown into something larger, an unexpected alliance between knowledge systems separated by millennia of development. It was during a quiet moment between lectures, as Alan sat alone in the observation lounge overlooking a blue dwarf star, that Kiztak finally approached him. I've been watching your classes, she said softly, talons tucked behind her back. You've made an impression. Alan sipped his coffee. That's what I do. Bleed on a few dummies, wrap up a few wounds, change a few minds. Kiztak gave a small smile. You're not what I expected from a species that was once labeled Containment Protocol Tier 8. Alan raised an eyebrow. You mean extreme threat with unknown escalation ceiling? Yeah, that was a fun first contact week. She stepped forward, her tone quieter now. I've read the files. The early ones. From when the Confederation first realized you existed. Alan didn't reply. Kiztak sat beside him, eyes still on the stars. The Vrixen ambassador said your people fought extinction-level threats, and won. Alan nodded slowly. We did. You withstood full-scale nuclear war and survived global ecological collapse. You endured centuries of war and disease with nothing but hope and duct tape. He chuckled. Duct tape's underrated. But the thing that confuses me, she continued, isn't how you survived all of that. It's how your people still chose to care. You still teach bandages. You still offer aid, even when the galaxy labels you dangerous. Alan sighed, rubbing his eyes. You want the real answer? She turned to him, silently. He met her gaze. Because we had to learn the hard way that just surviving isn't living. We clawed our way up from extinction so many times. We stopped asking if we deserved to, and started asking how to make it worth it. A long pause followed. I think, Kiztak said at last, that's why they fear you. Alan blinked. Because we want to help. She shook her head. Because you refused to die. Because even when the void opened its mouth, you spat in it and said, we're not done yet. You're terrifying, Alan Reyes. Not because you kill, but because we heal, he finished. She nodded. The next day, they reached the anomaly. It was a small, unassuming system near the galactic edge. 1 sun, 3 planets, and a massive derelict structure orbiting the second planet. Clearly artificial, yet ancient. Confederation records had no entry for it. No probes had returned data. No signals escaped its orbit. Captain Vrax called an emergency council in the command dome. This structure predates known civilizations, possibly even the Corthan precursors, he said, tail lashing. We're sending an away team to investigate. Dr. Reyes, your experience with human architecture and unconventional systems may be valuable. Alan blinked. You want me on the spooky ancient ruin mission? Wouldn't trust anyone else. The landing was uneventful, but the structure itself was not. It was massive, silent, and half buried in the red soil of the planet. Metallic surfaces were fused with bone-like polymers. Symbols that matched no known language lined the walls. The air inside was breathable, but stale. As Alan and the team moved deeper into the facility, they discovered sealed chambers, long-dead consoles, and faded holograms of creatures vaguely humanoid, but with unfamiliar proportions. Vrax's team took scans and readings, while Alan found himself drawn toward a dark corridor, its walls lined with handprints. Dozens of them. Small, large, clawed, flat, and one unmistakably human. Alan froze, reached out, pressed his hand to the print. It matched. Later, back aboard the ship, Vrax paced as Alan stared at the scan. This place might be a human outpost, Vrax muttered. From before we ever made contact. Before your people even knew the galaxy was watching. Alan said nothing. Kiztak leaned in. This could change everything we know about the Confederation's timeline. If humans reached the edge of space this long ago, then we were never just survivors, Alan whispered. We were explorers. A silent understanding passed through the room. The galaxy hadn't found humanity. Humanity had left breadcrumbs behind.